Welcome to the CSH series of workshop, everyone, online and offline. Thanks for being here today. So we have the pleasure, we are delighted to receive Barbara Čurda. Barbara is a researcher in anthropology associated to the University Clermont-Auvergne and presently hosted at the French Institute of Pondicherry in India. So Barbara is also a Marie Curie Fellow on a project called Gatrodi, which stands for Gender Asymmetry in the Transmission of Odissi Dance in India. Her work focuses on relational dynamics and conceptions of know-how amongst dance practitioners using qualitative as well as videographic methodologies. Just out of mere information, Barbara hasn't just studied Odissi from an external standpoint, but is a dancer herself, on top of teaching general anthropology and the anthropology of dance. Barbara, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again for coming to present your work here today at the CSH. We'll have a question and answer after Barbara's talk. The floor is yours.
Okay, so good evening to everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the team of the CSH, Stéphanie Tavoila-Maréval, Odile Henry, Christophe Z. Guilmoteau, and Joël Caballon for providing me with this opportunity to present here some of my research work, more specifically my research on one particular dance form, which is Odissi. And I also thank Niru Gohar for her help with all logistic questions. So today I am I'm making a presentation that is entitled Interrogating the Social Dynamics of Dance Practices, the Case of Odissi, which I thought was, as often it happens, quite an ambitious title for a single presentation. So let us see what we can do together. The first thing that I thought was important is actually, since I know you're from very diverse backgrounds, and there are some people who really sharply know what about different sorts of dances and others not at all. So I wanted to actually ask you what you associate with the word Odissi. Yes. Anything. I mean, anything is fine.
I don't have the vocabulary for describing dance,
yes.
So please don't take it. So it's very rough. But for me, I have seen a few shows of Odissi, and I would say to me, Odissi looks like Bharatanatyam, but less stiff. And I like Bharatanatyam. I don't want to offend anybody.
Okay. Maybe at least one more person. Yes. One last person. Female dancers rather than male dancers. Okay. Thank you. It was not like that earlier. So you all have some ideas. I'm just bringing in something to lead this discussion. So this image is actually, in the city of Bhubaneswar, which is the capital city of the Indian state Odisha, a lot of walls have been painted. It's an initiative which, as far as I know, is led by the Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation. And on many streets, the outer walls are being painted with all sorts of motifs. And I just was attracted to this one picture because it associates different things, which I thought are it's a kind of an emblematic kind of an image, because we have sports, we have dance, which I will just wildly guess that it is a classical dance. We have a lion there, so national parks. We have some monuments, and we have the Indian flag. So we have here a few elements which I thought were quite present in people's minds. Otherwise, this picture wouldn't be there, which is a contemporary picture. This photo has been taken a few months back, and which associate nationalism with different elements that are associated to heritage, in a way, cultural heritage. And nationalism was one of the triggers of the development of a dance genre, which Odissi dance is part, and that is the Indian classical dances. So yes, so Odissi is one of the so-called Indian classical dances, which are a genre that emerged along with the Indian independence. So it emerged at a time when dance forms developed in many countries of the world in order to showcase national culture. So though this is an Indian case, but we have such type of dance culture elsewhere. And Indian classical dances have, there are 8 dances that are officially considered to be classical. It is a label that is being attributed by the Indian government. They are associated with the regional culture of specific Indian states, which they are represented to be originating from. So Odissi is considered to be the classical dance of the Indian state of Odisha, which is an eastern Indian state situated south of Kolkata. And I hope you are okay with that. And what do Indian classical dances also, what is one of their particularities? Well, they are designed for stages that much resemble those of Western theater dances. There is a lot of dance practice that is not necessarily designed to be danced on the stage, that is not necessarily to be danced in a kind of a theater situation. So this is something which is very specific and very particular. So we can say that this is a very small little bit of what is happening in India with dance. I wanted to highlight just a few facts, just a very simple historical facts. Odissi dance emerged in the 1950s. So 1947 is the year of India's independence. 1948 is an important year for Odisha because the city of Bhubaneswar became the capital city of Odisha. It has been arbitrarily chosen. It was not to be a big town. It was a small, tiny little place. So it was a time when the Indian government decided to declare that there is a genre which is called the Indian classical dances, even though the developments that led to these declarations are prior to that. But this is the time when the Indian government declared that there is a classical genre. Then there is a very an event that has been highlighted and still is highlighted by Odissi practitioners. In 1954, 2 dancers came from Odisha to New Delhi and performed for about 10 minutes, which was about what they could do at that time, a dance that did not have a name. They called it Nacha, at an inter-university festival, and they attracted attention. They attracted attention from, notably from somebody who was a great dance critic and who is called Charles Fabry. So a Hungarian living in India. This is again something characteristic for the history of the dance. The name of Odissi appeared within the 1950s to be the name of the dance form. And within a very short time, when this event in New Delhi made a lot of, attracted a lot of media attention, and there started being people who say that there is a dance form in Odisha and it could be something classical. The question came up, but you don't have a repertory, so you can dance for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but what about giving us a show? So within a very short time, there have been efforts to make a repertory of Odissi dance, which could permit a performance of 1 or 2 hours. So that is in the late 1950s, there are different people who claim to have been the first ones to have done so. So I'm not going into the detail of that. But in 1958, Odissi was given the first government recognition as a classical dance, even though at that time it was not a full-fledged classical dance. It was just a regional variation of Bharatanatyam. It is later on that the government decided to accredit, to acknowledge that it was a classical dance on its own, in its own right. Okay, so these are the few historical facts. Now, I wanted to ask you again whether you have any, whether you have some associations with Odissi. There are some very popular common notions. So I'm coming up with something, but do you have anything to say? You don't, it's not a must. No. Christophe says no. Yeah, it's the question could be confused. Anything different? No?
Was it popularized by Kelucharan Mahapatra and it was kind of unknown before that? Or it wasn't as popular on the national scene before Kelucharan Mahapatra?
I would say that Kelucharan Mohapatra was really the big star of a few decades. He died in 2004 and he really was a big star. But I suppose that you cannot make him responsible of popularizing the dance form. But he has had the, brilliant international career. And yes, which was something that could happen at that time. Anything else? No, so I will just show you my picture. This is one more picture of that is seen on the walls of Bhubaneswar, so one of these paintings. And I don't know what you see there. Yes?
I think it's the Sun Temple in Konarak.
Yeah, Konarak Sun Temple. You see, you have some idea of that. That's fine. So I'm happy. Yes, so Odissi, like many other classical dances, is very often associated to what I have framed this title, Utopic Pasts. It is the, how to say, the use of an imaginary past in the present, which is helping to highlight certain things. Let us just be simple. So in the constitution of tangible as well as intangible heritage, building up an imaginary past that is carrying forth specific values is quite prevalent. In the case of India, archaeology has played a particularly important role, as a lot of claims on the glory of India have been formulated by referring to wonderful archaeological sites that are there in India. I just indicated two references, E.W. Said, Western Notions of the Orient. And I just mentioned Tapati Guha Thakurta, who has been writing specifically on how archaeology has been part of this big imaginary of brilliant Indian past, and which is, of course, related to colonialism, because, as we know, it is the British who highlighted the glory of a past India and at the same time depreciated the present of India. So there are in the dancers of Odissi do refer to all sorts of things in order to build up the idea that the dance is an ancient dance. So there is plenty of Hindu temples. In Puri, there is one, Puri, which is the town, which is a town that is situated at about 50 kilometers of Bhubaneswar. And there is a very big pilgrimage center there, which is the Jagannath temple. Konarak temple, everybody here seems to be knowing about Konarak temple. And in Bhubaneswar, there are plenty of temples. So the temple sculpture has been highlighted as being somehow linked to Odissi dance. And the other things are ancient texts on dramaturgy. Yes. And the dancers also like to evoke some people who danced in Jagannath temple. Now, I have noted the 20th century because in the 20th century, we had female temple servants called Maharis who were dancing in the in Jagannath temple, and boy dancers that are named Gotipuas. So these are used by the Odissi dancers just like figures, emblematic figures that are being referred to. And along with the sculpture, along with the ancient texts, to refer to kind of an imaginary dance in the past, which was of a very high culture. That idea is coming through repetitively. Okay, and here I put up a photograph which contrasts a little bit, maybe with the idea of magnificence that maybe comes through when we think about ancient temple sculpture and high culture and their dance claiming a high cultural status. So this photograph is taken in 2009 in Bhubaneswar. And I did choose it because it is quite characteristic of what dance schools used to look like in Bhubaneswar in the 1990s. And this is from 2009. And at present, you have a variety. Actually, there are some dance schools which look very smart, but you also have dance schools which look like this. Yes, so I would like to divert from that imaginary construction towards the social dynamics of Odissi dance, which is rooted, maybe it is something that I have indirectly said, that Odissi was, it came to light because of a national interest, and it is highlighted as a dance that is representing regional culture. So there is some different perspectives on the dance. So, I have quite immediately gone into, for this presentation, into the aspects that are kind of conflictual, because on the national side, what is often coming through, or what has been often coming through, is that Odisha is this rustic place, and the dancers of Odisha are kind of rustic. And on the regional side, in the 1990s, it was quite strong, often heard talk that they felt neglected. They felt that the national dancers are getting better chances than them. They are lacking sponsorship. They are lacking recognition, etc., etc. So there is a type of tension between that national and regional dynamics of the dance. Now, within the dance, within Odisha itself, there is another, I think, a class difference, because as Christoph has pointed out, dancers are supposed to be women. So, but which women? So the women either from the big cities, like from New Delhi, who came to Odisha to learn the dance from some male teachers, who were some perceived to be some rustic fellows, or some women born and brought up in the Oriya towns, specifically Bhubaneswar. So as I told you, Bhubaneswar is a city that was made the capital in 1948. In 1951, there were 16,000 inhabitants. In 1991, there were more than 4 lakhs. And in 2011, there were more than 8 lakhs. And we don't have the present figures, but the town is spreading wonderfully. So, and on the rural side, we have men who migrated from their villages to the town to make a living teaching Odissi. So in the 1950s, there was a very strong notion that we need to highlight Odissi when that idea came up that Odissi might be a classical dance, and we need to have a regional culture. We need to have a regional dance. So that idea was very, very, very strongly there, that it is men who should come forward to teach the dance to women, and the women should be women from good families. And of course, there was a little problem there, because mostly Brahmin families in those days wouldn't like their daughters to dance, specifically because it was difficult to marry away a girl who had been dancing. So that was something which comes out very frequently in the narrations. Yes, so there is a kind of, between the rural, urban, and the male-female dynamics in Odisha, there is a connection. So from the 1950s onwards, as I told you, the idea that males should be teachers was very strong. And from the 1950s onwards, Odissi built up an all-male genealogy. So 3 masters appeared, amongst them Mr. Kelucharan Mohapatra, and Priyambada Hejmadi Mohanty, who is somebody who has been active. She's the person, one of the 2 persons who danced in 1954 in New Delhi, but she left dancing afterwards. But she has always been contributing in some way to the dance scene. She has written an article that is entitled "The Trinity in Odissi," because the 3 male masters who were depicted, at least in Odisha, to be the heads of 3 gharanas of a genealogy that was supposed to be reproducing itself through the generations. They were 3 people, yes. I know that people who practice Odissi in Delhi sometimes talk about 4 people, because they count 1 more person. Okay, so that male-female divide is also linked to an economical equation, because, as I told you before, the idea was that rich women from Odisha and from outside Odisha should be the patrons of the dance. So that is something that is also culturally quite acceptable, that one would be donating something towards performing. And so it is something that was that has been quite prevalent in the Odissi dance scene. You had a lot of males who, trying to make a living, were hoping to get some students who have a good network and who are also from a wealthy family, so that they can invest in performing. And one thing that helped with that was the ethics of domesticity, because women, as we know, are not supposed to work, and so they may use their family's wealth towards dance promotion. So this is a kind of like a common sense idea that has been very, very strongly present, and that has been I think quite important in shaping up the dynamics of Odissi dance performance, and within that gap of males being the masters and females being the performers. So I'll take a minute to talk about that tension between the national and the regional, knowing that there have been some contradictory aesthetic agendas, and there have been tensions around. in the Odissi dance scene and discussing about what is the real aesthetic of the dance, what the dance should be and become in the future. So a very strong idea of Odissi dances from the onset is that the dance has to be preserved. It has to be saved. So I'm just referring to one seminar in the 1990s that was organized in Bhubaneswar by an association, an Odia association called the Bhubaneswar Music Circle. So National Seminar on Odissi Dance Choreography and Presentation. That was a one-week festival with seminars in the morning. So in the evenings, dancers would present the choreographies with their groups, and in the mornings, their work would be discussed and criticized, and if it was not up to the expectations of who were considered locally to be the ones who know, then they were having a bad time, because those discussions, they were quite heated in many instances. So it is some situation where that male-female dynamic is reproduced, because it's Odia practitioners, but also a lot of those male practitioners accusing the outsiders of adulterating the dance. In 2003, there was another festival, another seminar, that was organized in Odisha by the Sangit Natak Academy, so the Central Sangit Natak Academy, performing our traditions of Odisha with reference to Odissi dance. In this seminar, it was the opposite. It was the aesthetic tastes of those performers from Delhi who felt that they were being badly treated when they come to Odisha, and who also stated that they were frightened to dance in Odisha and to present the new choreographies in Odisha, who through the seminar hoped that they would legitimize their ways of choreographing. So that divide we have on one side, a rather high class, urban, female section, and on the other side, low class, rustic male practitioners, and a competition about who is owning the dance and what is the right dance. So a lot of competitive spirit, rumors, and conflict. I am just going to highlight one particular controversy that came up, because in such situations, there are sometimes there has been mediatization of what have been represented to be mistakes in the choreography by certain choreographers. So there was in 2009, I haven't noted the name or the date on the slide, I'm sorry, a controversy that was highlighted in the local newspapers and on television, who was attacked, a woman choreographer who was having a lot of tension with her master at that time. And she was attacked for what? The newspaper said, there was a newspaper article which said, Jagannath, please forgive them. And the fault was that on stage, the dancers had been holding Jagannath Murtik with the hands. And somehow the media made some noise suggesting that this was a mistake, something what is not supposed to do. So the choreographer was attacked for not for choreographing or doing bringing in some particular dance movements, or for using a particular music or something like that, but for something which was directly a kind of a misbehavior with God. So the controversy was quite lively because somebody filed an FIR with the local police, and though I believe that she did not have to go to prison, she had to respond to that. And the Sanskrit College also went on strike. Yes, and when one went into try to talk to people on the spot and try to understand what was going on, it was actually very hazy. There was no way one could find out whether any mistake had ever been done or whether there was any type of rule that was to be followed that she had not followed. It was, but the important thing is that there was a controversy. And I thought I should bring in that those relational dynamics be compared to those described by Professor Ute Husken in relation to rituals in South Indian temples around what are highlighted by the participants to be mistakes in the rituals, where she states that effectively there are these families who also go to file FIRs at the police in order to protest against certain mistakes they allege have been taking place in the rituals. So something which I will call making up boundaries, trying to build your own family, your own gharana, you could say, though this word is really not a word people use in Odisha, but it is, they can use it, but it's not, it's like using a word from North. So like that. And so again, you can say that we talked about nationalism in the beginning, and we have this dance being Indian, so it is not a non-Indian dance. And then from the inside, it also has to be specified that who is the actual right performer. So yes, and so I would just highlight it. So since Jagannath is, who is on the photograph here, is the one who was supposed to be badly treated in that choreographic event. The whole controversy kind of revolved around the question of on whose side is he, because on both sides, people claimed that Jagannath was with them. And I also would say that there are changes in the way people judge whether choreography is right or wrong when you look at what is happening in present times. Okay, I wanted to spend a few minutes looking at the relational dynamics within the routine of dance schools, because I thought that here I gave you a kind of an overview of some type of things that are happening in the dance scene as a whole, and what is happening in the everyday experiences of people. So for that, I put up a question here. What is a transmission situation or dance class? Let's call it a dance class to be simple. What do you expect to happen in a dance class? Can I have a little bit of a feedback on that?
Interactive session. I'll have a word maybe. So learning steps, learning gestures, mudras in particular, but that's again very, I mean, a conception from looking from far.
And how does that happen?
Repetitions.
Repetitions.
I don't know.
Yes, yes. Go ahead. Who else has any input to give on what would you expect to happen in a dance class?
I would say the teacher perform it first and then show us the step. And I would expect the teacher so to show us some correction, how to stand properly, how to do the movement correctly.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody who would like to react to that?
There's also the role of music. So I think teachers has to introduce students to musical reeds and all the musical tradition.
Yes.
Going with it.
Okay. Anybody else? What do you expect? Because I also had a lot of discussion during
We've got a comment from online, Madhu Narayan, who's saying learning and practice.
learning and practice.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you, online.
Thank you, Madhu. Anybody more?
Like here in India, in the dance classes, the dance teacher is depicted as guru. So this tradition is also followed in the dance classes. And with that, I am agreeing with Sir that when we go to dance classes like Odissi, we don't even we don't even learn dance. We are getting to know about musicians also. There is a group of musicians also. There are clothes, ornaments. There are many things, musical instruments, the different musical instruments which will be used during that dance performance. So we get to know those things also.
Okay.
As you rightly said, so you ask what's a transmission situation, so a relation between a guru and a shishya as a tradition, guru shishya parampara, I guess. Is that what you're hinting at?
Okay. Do you associate anything specific to that relation? Why not?
Sometimes cooking for the Guruji, doing his laundry and his dishes too.
This is something exploitation. Exploitation, abuse, okay. Okay, thank you for your many valuable inputs. So now I'm going to show you just a little clip of transmission situation observed live by me. And this is what we have. So I have been removing the faces because of ethical reasons. I'm just showing the class. So what do you see there? Many smileys, yes. The teacher is the one in the corner. Who is the teacher? In which corner? In the left, up or down? Because sitting, down sitting. But you say that the teacher is showing the dance. What do we do with that? And now you say he's not at all showing the dance. He's supervising, yes, and that goes with our idea of asymmetry. That's quite okay. So, any other reactions? No, no. Yeah, so one thing is there, Odissi is a dance which demands a lot of physical exercise. And so actually, if you want to dance, you have to practice. And the teacher can't practice for you, so you have to do it. And so physically speaking, it's quite logical that it is the dancers who dance and the teacher is watching. Now, this is one moment of a transmission situation, but it's quite a characteristic moment. But I was thinking sometimes that you can compare to what is happening in sports. You might have a coach who might be advising somebody, but that doesn't mean that he will do things. But this is very typical in a transmission situation of dance. And I have been having sometimes somebody from Asia telling me that, of course, in my cultural background, the one who teaches is the one who sits. It's not the one who shows. So there we have also different types of ideas in our heads about what is teaching. And so, yes. So what is a dance class? I just put up a few things which are taken from my observations. I say that a dance class is a place where people sit and watch. They might be watching others dancing. There are moments when there will be some people dancing very intensely, and then they will be sitting down and having a rest. And that is also why a dance class is a place where people sit and talk, because in between two moments of intense practice, they do spend time talking. And so one of the things I had been doing is observing what people talk about. And in certain, yeah, I will come to that in a second, but I have actually not concentrated on their talk when they are sitting, because but one thing I wanted to highlight, Stacey Prickett had been writing that within a dance class of Kathak she had observed in New Delhi, there were no boundaries between the spirit of the dance and the spirit of life and living through the world of dance. So she also had that observation in a very different manner, that things of everyday life actually enter into the dance space, and they're intermingled with the actual learning situation and body practice. Okay, so there are some talks during dance classes which might not at all have relation to the body movements, and I have observed situations where, for example, the teacher would be talking out his relationships with his individual students. So there is a lot of importance given to their identities, to what is their relationship with him at that particular moment of time. And as you say, inequalities are there, so there can be tensions with specific students, whereas others are being treated with a big smile. So this type of situations are definitely part of transmission situations. So I like to look at transmission situations as something as situations in which a lot of things take place that also take place in other social spaces. And I also believe that this is not particularly specific to dance. I mean, I think that this happens in other classroom situations. We all have been in classroom situations, so I see somebody nodding with the head. So I suppose that you are relating to something. Yes, I'm just coming up with a few slides from a dance class. So here we have the male teacher. You cannot see, but he's holding two sticks with which he's beating the rhythm, and he's looking at the person who is having the second smiley, who is a woman doing the movements. And in this situation here, he has spotted that this woman had done something wrong. So he is lifting his stick to kind of show her that this is not exactly what he expected. And in the next second, he turns towards the next dancer, who is at my extreme left. And there was a little tension just before, but here there is some kind of relaxation and everybody's smiling. He says about the woman in green, he says she's an Adivasi. She's just doing Adivasi dance. And the next thing that happens is that everybody laughs, and then he goes back to the woman in green and asks her where is her village. And actually she is not at all an Adivasi, but she is from a very good family. So that is why I think the tone of the conversation is a light one. But what I wanted to bring in is that you have these identity ascriptions which are being played out along with the body movement. And when I talked to the woman in green, she said to me that her teacher was correcting her dance. So there is a lot of, intermingling and interweaving of different dynamics within a transmission situation. So that was, I think I'm very happy because I've made my point, which was to relate like the overall social dynamics in Odissi, in the Odissi dance networks, and what can be happening to an individual in one situation. That was actually my point. Yes, so last but not least, are there changes? Yes, in the 2020s, I have seen a lot of changes in the township of Bhubaneswar. in the networks of the dancers. And so the town, let me first tell about the town. The town of Bhubaneswar has been expanding, and this is a part of the town that is a little central. You see things have been cleaned up. It was not looking neat like this before. There are paintings on the walls, and it looks rather neat. And this is place when I went outskirts. This was actually to be a street. I had been walking on that street a couple of months before. And when I went to that place again, I found myself in front of this a little bit strange situation where some construction work was going on and the street was just unpracticable. And here we have a place in Bhubaneswar where a little bridge that is, the man who's working on a bridge that has been rebuilt after it actually broke down, that is also at the margins of the city. So the city is expanding. There is a lot of population. There is a lot more of dancers. And there is also change in the economics of the dance. I think that in the past 20 years, the economical situation in India has shifted a lot. And now that equation that I talked about before, where dance teachers, male dance teachers would just expect their female disciples to be bringing them wealth, it's not exactly working that way anymore. Now people are earning through dance in many different ways. They are earning by making festivals. They are earning in many, many different manners. So that I think changes the dynamics. And the activity of dance seems to become less important in people's lives, in the sense that very often they have a side occupation from which they earn and they dance along with. So as a consequence, the relation between practitioners as well as the transmission are modified too. I will stop here, if you allow me. I'm thanking you.
Okay, so we'll open the conversation and the question and answer. So of course, as I told you earlier online, if you have any questions, it's the right moment to raise them, you can just put them in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll open the
chat box. There is something in the discussion, no?
It was from earlier, I think.
It
just
was from earlier.
one comment.
Has been
Yeah,
treated?
can you just check? Yeah, it was earlier. So I think Christophe right now, right here, has a question for you. So we'll just listen to his.
Thanks, Barbara. Can you tell us more about the invention of Odissi dance in the 1950s and how a part of India, which is culturally, if I may say so, peripheral, managed to project itself as a cradle of some indigenous dance tradition, and who were the main actors behind this transformation, and why is it that finally they managed to project Odissi as a unique, distinct style, different from Bharatanatyam or Kuchipudi. And that sounds surprising when a lot of other areas in India, I may think of Punjab or Maharashtra or Gujarat, for instance, or Karnataka, haven't been successful in projecting their own dance style. So who was behind that? And then I have another question. You have said that dance teachers are men from the countryside. Well, how come?
Yes.
And you also hinted at the link with temple institutions or religious institutions, but were they active in the 1950s? I mean, so I mean, I'm
Yes,
curious.
you're
I know
bringing
it's not
all the things I have not talked about.
yeah. It's not part of your presentation, but that would help us better figure out because what the exact social history of Odissi, and I think it's feasible because it's very recent. It's just we're talking about 70 years ago.
Yes.
So it's pretty, I guess, pretty well documented one way or the other. So that's my.
So I don't know whether I'll be able to help you out sufficiently, but what is sure is that the first dance practice, which was the trendsetter for the Indian classical genre, was Bharatanatyam, which developed in the earlier. And I just say that it's in the 1950s that the government said that there is a genre called the classical dances, but the developments which led to that, they are prior to that. And we have here Amrit Srinivasan, I think, who might be happy to say a few more words. But in the 1930s, Bharatanatyam was projected to be the classical dance of India and the only dance of India, and any other dance was supposed to be a derivative from that dance. And then slowly, within a couple of decades, other practitioners from other states started claiming that they also have a practice and that it's also actually a dance form. And in that way, the independence movement helped a lot because there was just a need to highlight, to show that the cultural richness of India. So there was a wish to project India as a nation that had something to offer from its rich past and culture. So I think that all these were very important in getting people to move. Now, I have given you a very simplified version. In the 1930s in Odia houses, there were some girls learning dance here and there from some teachers. That is something that happened. And slowly, so by the 1950s, that idea that dance could be something that could be done, it had already picked up that idea that there is a dance in the South, which is classical, that everybody was eyeing, that was there as well. People from Odisha, like Sanjukta Panigrahi, went to Kalakshetra to be trained in Bharatanatyam, and they came back to Odisha. And there were why the males, and I have given you again, because it's not, I didn't want to say that women are not teaching, because actually women are teaching, but in those days it was a very strong ingrained idea that it's the male who have been to be teachers. And they actually came from the theaters. There was a theater in Puri, which was very active, and a few of the men who have become famous, they came out of the theater that was Annapurna Theater. And they eventually did form a union, which was called the Jayantika, in which they wanted to set the codes for the Odissi dance. Eventually, some of them broke out of that and they contested and so on. But there was a lot of activity. So that is within the 1950s. And somebody like Charles Fabry had been quite active in trying to get people to accept that there was a dance form called Odissi. He wrote that it took him about 6 years to get different response from people's faces, that they initially were looking quite surprised when they heard that a dance form called Odissi existed. Yes, I think that the overall dynamic of the post-independence period is really important in getting that particular dance form to become one of the highlighted dance forms of India. Yes. Yes.
These might be in connection with what Christoph has asked you. So first is that could you observe some linkage of Odissi with the intersection of caste, religion, and oppression of women? And because most of names which we hear from the field of Odissi dancer or popular names are upper caste, and which shows how exclusive it is and the hegemonic culture. Then the Jagannath cult is mostly of Hindu god and the tradition. But there are second set of people who believes that there has been Buddhist and tribal origins also. So they also claim that Odissi is their form of expression or dance. So how do you link Odissi with that? And then coming back to the oppression part of women, where Odissi glorified oppression of women with Devdasi culture, because in 1995, Odisha government announced a news for interview to select Devdasi in Temple of Jagannath Puri. And some, it's important to be noted that on that time, this temple was regulated or governed by the government. And actually after 1960s, it was taken up by the government. So, these are the facts that I wanted to share with you, and see, know that if you could explore linkages in your exploration. And the last thing I want to share is that that this form of dance, when we call it folk dance, is questionable. Because is it how it is? If we assume that it is folk, then why should we glorify it?
I don't. I could not get the link of your suddenly talking about folk.
Yeah, because you mentioned around 1950s that it was, this name was the name of Odissi dance was given, and then different states had their own dances. So then later this this kind of air came up that people started giving names to the dance. So in Odisha, and coming from Bharatanatyam, Odissi was given name. So in the context of this, if we assume that it is folk, then why should we glorify it? And
but why folk? Why should we assume that it is folk? It is. It's from the point of view of the Indian government, classical dances are not folk. That is the classification system of the Indian government. I don't look into that. I don't view it like that. But for the Indian government, there is classical dance, which is something that is more exquisite and better than folk. And at the same time, they still, highlight folk. But so I cannot understand why you bring in the name of folk suddenly.
Because you were using the word folk.
No, I have not used it once.
Okay.
I have not used it once.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right, then maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, so these were the major kind of things I wanted to know from you about caste, religion, and the women's oppression linkage.
Okay, yeah. So I have not been putting in any word about caste. I have been talking about the class differences. They are also related to caste, of course. I have an impression that when you look at Bharatanatyam, the dancing seems to be very, very purely Brahmin. I don't know whether it is true, but in Odissi, it is not like that. There are some people who might be upper caste Brahmin or upper caste other than Brahmin. and there are people who are from other castes, and specifically people like Keluchar and Mohapatra do not come at all from upper caste. Like he comes from a village near Puri, and they are agricultural families, and a lot of the from the generations. Yes. No, Keluchar and Mohapatra is not a Brahmin. No.
So could you elaborate what he is, except being a villager? Because being a villager doesn't preclude the possibility of being a Brahmin.
You're right. There are male Brahmins in the dance field, and then they are not as wealthy as some other. I mean, I also know a male Brahmin in the dance field who is from a wealthy family, but you have that is why, I mean, caste is not giving you a whole picture of who a person is. And you have within the population of that time, let's say the 1990s, you have a lot of male participants who came either from agricultural families. So, and some of them might be Brahmins also, but they are not, you know, they are not Brahmins who have a lot of social influence or a lot of wealth. They are not that type of Brahmins. And when you look at the women, some rich Brahmins are there, and some rich non-Brahmins are there, and some non-rich women are there as well. Well, generally speaking, anybody in the Odissi dance field is looking at Hindu divinities. As far as I know, yes. Yes, maybe you have some.
Sorry, just to zone out and just talk about this class and gender and caste question. I think since you're also linking it to Bharatnatyam as a derivative of Bharatnatyam, there's a lot of.
I didn't say it's a derivative. I said that Bharatnatyam performers had brought up a perception that their dance was the real dance and that other dance forms were derivatives. But this is something that was the idea of a time, the projection of a time, which is not being now. Yes.
Just in the question of, I mean, and this is where I guess gender and caste become something which is talked about in Bharatnatyam quite a bit, because obviously there's quite a bit of controversy right now, and especially amongst Dalit literature, saying that Devdasi culture was appropriated in terms of a classical culture for Bharatnatyam. And so therefore, even in terms of Devdasis, it's not a question of pure exploitation. There is quite a bit of agency in terms of shaping what the cultural practices of Bharatnatyam was, and temple dancing itself was not something that has the same connotations of exploitation as it might have today. So in that context, given its links to the Puri Jagannath temple, and also given its links to this imagined history around the 1950s, because obviously there are certain dances which were classified as folk dances around the 1950s as well. For example, I think Bhangra was selected accordingly in 1956, which was an amalgamation of about 6 or 7 district dances from Punjab and music, which was again performed in a curated national space. And then because of its extremely diasporic population, became something that got collated as this dance of Punjab. But there is no such thing as a pure Bhangra. It was actually 4 or 5 kinds of dances and kinds of music that were amalgamated on a national stage. So then one thing becomes a folk dance and one thing becomes a classical tradition. And this differentiation, both in terms of literature and the kind of caste, class, scriptural dynamics that come in, because obviously scripture is very important for what becomes classical and what becomes folk, or religion becomes a little important for. Could you just shed a little bit more light on that why did this become classical? What were its associations with something like Bharatnatyam? And the controversies that plague Bharatnatyam today in terms of, is it a upper caste appropriation of a more Devadasi tradition versus this thing?
So you have, you're digging into the story by bringing in the Devadasis that I haven't brought up so far, which is the question of the dance in Jagannath temple. There were female temple servants in the Jagannath temple who were, they were temple servants. They were not just dancing, they were doing other things, but dance was part of their duties. And for the Odissi dancers, it is important to refer to them. And they say that the dance in the temple has been lost and that they had to relate to the men because they are supposed to have been linked to the Gotipur tradition, which is that of male boy dancers. And so they say that the boys were, I mean that representation, if you take it at that level of what it might have been a few decades back, was that something of an antique dance form, which might have been 2000 years old, would have been preserved by some boy dancers until the 20th century, and somehow it re-emerged and became Odissi. So that is a kind of a mystical construction. It is true that in the 1950s, somebody you said about the temple, the change of the change in the temple when the government took over. It took over the yes, because before that it was the king of Puri who was governing the temple. Yes. So where was I? So in the 1950s, the Maharis, they didn't call themselves Devadasis at that time, although with the works of Frederick Marglin, the word Devadasis has been taken in, and it has, I think, some social value for some people to use it. They were not being looked at by society in a very good eye, and they were also not taken into the discussions on that shaping up the new dance tradition, and they felt rejected. They applied for government sponsorship in order to make a school. They did not succeed. Although in the 2000s, one of the last Maharis before she died has been teaching some people, and they have been again coming up with a new dance. They don't call it Odissi, and they have been so there are some new schools which are leaning on that practice that was learned from that woman. But in the 1950s, they were being pushed aside due to social stigma, and because it was not them who were supposed to be in the scene at that time. That was not the program. I don't know whether I have been replying to your question properly.
No, I think just also the...
Yes, I think you might be having a lot of things to add.
Thank you to the two young men before me, because they have brought it up to date.
Mm-hmm.
In Tamil Nadu, the appropriation aspect does cover caste, because they're saying Brahmins appropriated. Huh? It's very clear. It's not gender, because the same women, and I know them too, may very well be gendered. You know, their own men are still in control. So we won't go into that. But the larger issue, and that's to Barbara, I think she raised it too, we are going around it, but the issue of sexuality and oppression, what I'd like to ask you, Barbara, and many others, what's different in the dance from, say, the wrestlers are out there in, I don't know whether you know about Delhi, they're complaining about sexual oppression from this minister who was a sports authority. There is in Kalakshetra, in the Bharatanatyam tradition, there was a huge strike over sexual oppression by one of the teachers. We have the whole Me Too movement, talking about in the America, talking about the universities and media. What is it about the dance which is, you'll have to identify it, you see? It's not enough to say it was sexual oppression. I'm not saying you're saying that, but some of the questions seem to indicate that. We have to be able to say either, was it because it's bodily? Is it because there's caste difference? When women in Tamil Nadu is primarily Brahmin women and rich women, arrogant women used to be, I don't know how they are now, but they would not take it from a lower caste guru teacher who had been brought out from the village by Rukmini, which they never do otherwise. The women used to go to them for learning, but it was for the first time that they brought this old man out to the city, which was demeaning him really, because you go to the guru, you don't bring the guru over like some, you know, IT expert or something, you know, outsource him. But what I'm trying to say is that you have to identify, I'm interested.
Yes.
Because the obvious thing is it's bodily. And it is also sexual, the dance, the hip movements, the sculptures. There is sexuality in dance, even in any dance. But what else is there? Is it caste? In the case you're mentioning, where he's showing a stick. Now, how is it different from, say, a father showing a stick to a, it's fairly common. Parents, you know, we're not talking about, even in Europe, I mean, it's not as though it was not an unknown tradition. So what's the difference? Is it pedagogy? Is it, what is your interest? Because it's an important issue which has not been covered. Yes, we have a lot of discussions on arts and sexual harassment. There is a group which is working on it, and it's important. But theoretically, where is it coming from?
There's so many things.
It's just a comment really, but would you be interested in following that up? Because
what you're pinpointing, and what I find very interesting is that you're pinpointing at the different ways in which, like you say, there can be a bodily oppression, there can be sexual harassment, there can be an economical exploitation, there can be a caste relationship, and all these things are there and they play in a different way. So what I found very interesting in the way you put up the question, and I don't think I have immediately an answer, is that you are just putting up that necessity of differentiating between these different.
Because am I right? And I'll end there.
Yes.
That it was there also in ballet. It
is definitely,
so many
yes.
movies.
Actually,
woman now, this famous movie in Oscar, was it in the Oscars, where the conductor, you might say, a woman can also oppress another woman.
There is
or a boy. You know, I mean, that I forget its name now, but so what are we really saying about the arts, which leads to painters? I mean, Picasso, you know, we don't need to go further than so many well-known. The lore is filled with so-called sexual oppression, or harassment is the new word, but what do we want to say about it? So if we don't have anything much to say about it, it's better not to say it, you know? What do we have to say about it theoretically? How does one put this on?
Oh, thank you for being with me. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Unless you have any last comment or anything.
Is there any
see
other
you next
question? Anything that?
Thanks for online money.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you, Monica. Thank you for being here.